Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to have Professor Vijay Govindarajan on the show today. Professor Vijay Govindarajan is a Coxe Distinguished Professor at Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth College and an Executive Fellow at Harvard Business School. He's a faculty partner in the Silicon Valley incubator MAC 49. He's widely regarded as one of the world's leading experts in strategy and innovation. He's a New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and his most recent book is The Three-Box Solution. His HBR articles have won McKinsey Awards, and they're amongst HBR's all-time top 50 bestsellers. VG was named by Thinkers 50 as a top 3 management thinker in the world and received the Breakthrough Innovation Award. He's worked with CEOs and top management teams in over 40% of the Fortune 500 companies. He's a keynote speaker in events such as the Business Week CEO Forum, TED, and World Economic Forum. So Professor VG needs no introduction, so it's an absolute pleasure to have him here. Welcome, Professor VG.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here, join you.
Sure. The pandemic has forced companies to innovate, and they had to really be creative to manage their day-to-day priorities, going virtual, and at the same time, they had to reinvent for an uncertain future. So there have been a lot of learnings. Companies, some have done exceedingly well, others have not done as well. How do you think companies responded to this crisis, and what could they have done better?
You see, I call pandemic is one of those events which are truly black swan events. They are really non-linear and fundamental change. And if you really think about it, if you go back in history, whenever there was a black swan event, a non-linear event, then people try to respond in ways which they resisted until that point in time. They are forced to respond because of the nonlinear event. And then what happens is, post the crisis, there is always a fundamental change. Take, for instance, World War II. The British men had to go to war. The British men who are working in factories had to go to war. So somebody had to do the factory job. So reluctantly, they recruited women to do factory jobs, something that they resisted until that point in time, but they were forced to do it. Post World War II, what they realized were women not only did those jobs, many of them were very, very good at it. Women's movement has never looked back since that time. Pandemic is one such event. As you rightly said, almost every organization were forced to experiment. Take my own industry, education. In 5 days, we had to go on Zoom. If our dean had told us 3 years ago, hey guys, all of you should teach on Zoom, there would have been a revolt, to put it mildly. But in 5 days, we all went on Zoom. But that is for business continuity. We were forced. The key question is, post-pandemic, what should be a permanent change education institutions should embrace, which they can incorporate with their business model that they used before pandemic, but then augment and strengthen the business model? That is the key question. And I think there are many issues pandemic has raised. In fact, recently I posted in my LinkedIn 5 big issues that I find businesses must address post-pandemic. They are not in any particular order of importance. Number 1 to me is digital transformation of asset-heavy industries like education, healthcare, automobiles, etc. Second is diversity and inclusion.
Okay.
Third is stakeholder capitalism. Fourth is future of work. And fifth is reconfiguring global supply chain. So these affect just about every industry and every company. So therefore, they need to figure out new business models that incorporate these 5 issues, according to me, and there could be other issues, while maintaining their excellence in the core business that they do. That's the central challenge.
Okay. Yeah, I think all of these are key points which can benefit companies. What I have observed is when companies are forced with some of these innovations, it is very difficult to sustain this in the longer run. Some of these, yes, become a practice, but many of these companies revert back to the earlier, whatever was business as usual or the old normal. How can executives who see that a change is beneficial for the company, they've seen this during the pandemic, how can they sustain that innovation?
I think I have this framework three-box solution, which is exactly addresses this question. And as you rightly say, box one, which is your core business, is where people go back to. And box two, box three is the new business model. And during pandemic, we were forced to do things. But post-pandemic, the tendency is to go back to business as usual. There are a lot of universities, just taking my own industry as an example. Once the pandemic got over, they said, my God, that nuisance is finished. So let's go back to face-to-face classroom. I say, that's a mistake, because there is something very interesting about digital technologies. That doesn't mean the residential experience should be given up. But how do you use that to make, because if you take the 4-year university education in this country, that is the gold standard, the residential model. And there's a lot of benefit to the residential model. But how do you use digital technologies to make the gold standard with diamond embedded in it? That's the question. And that a lot of universities do not do, because once the crisis is over, then the tendency is to go back to business as usual. And that is a normal human tendency, because if you think about it, most of the people and most of the resources are tied up in your box one core business, something what I call dominant logic. There is a dominant logic amongst universities. And that dominant logic says, hey, you got to be on campus and you got to attend classes in person. That is the best way to deliver education. And that dominant logic is what the faculty who teach buy into it, the students buy into it, etc. So it's very difficult to change the dominant logic. So that's the main problem.
Yeah, I totally agreed. In my work in AI, I've seen organizations they revert back to the dominant logic in various ways. One of the ways I've observed is they, even when they embrace technologies like AI, they do it in a piecemeal fashion. They do it in projects. Some people hope that it doesn't disrupt their entire business, and they do it in a very narrow fashion. So how can innovation be applied mainstream within the organization, and what would you advise executives to do? You talked about box one taking the precedence, and in your framework you talk about box three, which is the business of the future. How can that become mainstream, and how do you transition a company towards that?
I think the key issue is leadership. I think the CEO has to feel the need to change the company. And by the way, the transformation is not a revolution. By that I mean you throw the old and embrace the new. Transformation is a journey. Therefore, if you are CEO of Rolls-Royce, you have to have a point of view about the year 2030. And that point of view has to say digital transformation, because Rolls-Royce essentially sells a physical product. They sell aircraft engine and then service the aircraft engine. That's their box one business today. And they have to have a point of view for year 2030 that says we have to create new source of value using software. And that we will achieve by year 2030. But strategy is not about what you do in the future. Strategy is about what you do today to create that future. Therefore, in year 2021, once you are convinced of that, then you can continue to invest in your box one business, which is the physical product, aircraft engine, but at the same time, start a small experiment. I'm not asking companies to invest billions of dollars. Start a small experiment in the software business. And then it is a question of testing assumptions and pivoting your way to a workable new business model. Therefore, the part that I'm saying is leaders have to recognize we need a new future. And then to future proof the company, you have to start today. If you want to future proof Rolls-Royce for the year 2030, the journey begins today. You have to imagine the future, but proceed from the present. And in the present, you must create a dedicated team for the box tree, because dominant logic will kill you. Imagine again, the dominant logic in Rolls-Royce is all aeronautical engineers first. That's who build the aircraft engines. Whereas in software business, you need AI experts, you need computer scientists, you need software engineers, incompatibility in competency. Not only that, aircraft engine business is a long product life cycle.
Yeah.
And you have to make a perfect product before you sell it. Whereas software is a short product life cycle. And then the whole idea in software is to make an imperfect product, send it to your customer, and learn to do it better. But you never send an imperfect aircraft engine to British Airways and ask them to fly it. Therefore, there is a fundamental difference in the logic in these two businesses. So you can never ask the aircraft engine people to say, hey, create a software business. It'll never happen. Not because they're bad people. In fact, if they are good people doing the right job, they will never create the software business. Therefore, you must protect this box tree from the effects of the dominant logic. So that's the key. And that's what most leaders, first of all, leaders have to understand it's important to transform and have a point of view about the future, and then have the courage to commit to starting a separate unit for the box tree. By the way, that separate unit cannot be isolated from the box one performance engine, because the only way Rolls-Royce will succeed as compared to a pure Silicon Valley startup in software is if there are some assets and capabilities of the box one aircraft engine business that can be leveraged by the software unit. In this case, for instance, it could be the relationship with customers, and it could be aircraft engine that they sell. You put sensors and you collect data. Therefore, the software business is able to access data, customer data, whereas a British Airways is not going to give that customer data to Google or some other Silicon Valley startup, because they don't trust how the data will be used. Whereas Rolls-Royce has 100 years of trustworthy relationship with the customers. So there is a lot of assets the box one performance engine has that should benefit this experiment. By the way, therefore what I'm saying is you have to do two contradictory things. You have to first separate the box tree from box one, so that the box tree is not affected by the dominant logic of box one. At the same time, the box tree has to interact with the dominant logic. That interaction will never happen smoothly. There's going to be awful lot of conflicts. Imagine the people in the aircraft engine business, they would be terrified of the software people talking to British Airways. What if they produce a software that doesn't work? Then I may lose, because aircraft engine is a big ticket item. By doing something small ticket item, they can spoil the reputation of Rolls-Royce. So there's awful lot. And also use software and give advice to British Airways how to fly their planes. And what if something goes wrong when the plane is 50,000 feet away from ground? And so there is a natural point of conflict. And therefore, it is again the job of the CEO to manage down the conflicts. Easy to say, difficult to do. That is why most companies don't do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you called out some very key points. One is the role of the leadership, and you talked about creation of this new unit and protecting, at the same time, making some critical linkages so that it continues to get those signals to grow. What I've observed in some organizations is, yes, it's a great first step for say the CEO to have that vision and declare it publicly and fund such a unit. But in your experience, do you think setting up of the unit and sharing the vision and funding is sufficient, or should the CEO play a much more a bigger role in the ground? What else would be the CEO's responsibilities in nurturing this new unit?
In fact, CEO's role just starts when you fund the unit. CEO's role becomes even more important as this box one begins to gain traction. Think of it this way: box one, the day you start it, the value is zero, because the value of an idea is zero. The value in box three gets created only when you execute it. And execution is where all the conflicts are going to happen. And as box three begins to grow and become more and more successful, the tensions will not decrease, it will increase. Because as box one begins to grow, then it will ask for more resources. And resources are finite. If that box three wants more resources, there is less for box one. So, and also as there are more and more software engineers, they will assume more power. Therefore, they'll conflict naturally with the box one performance engine, because box one strategy and box three strategy are fundamentally different. This is one of the main reasons why AI efforts and all fail in organizations. They are really not elevated to strategy. They are essentially tackling some operational issues in a piecemeal way. I think the data scientists are not the person who should be primarily responsible for digital transformation. Digital transformation should be the responsibility of the CEO. And CEOs think about strategy. Data scientists will play an important role in supporting that strategy. Therefore, first of all, you got to think about how do you create a new strategy for software business, which is very different than the physical analog box one business. And then AI and data scientists and all these other things are tools that can support that strategy.
Yeah, very well said. And in fact, the last 5 years, there have been surveys which call out the biggest challenges that CEOs and chief data officers face. Organizational culture was the topmost one in every single one of those surveys. And I've seen most projects fail because the adoption by the end users is poor. Change management is tough. And you rightly mentioned for AI, this is the biggest stumbling block. In your book, you talk about box two, which fits in well into this point we're talking about. Can you elaborate on how they can address this challenge?
Yeah, box one is manage the present. That's your core business. Box two is selectively forget the past, and box three is create the future. And box three is the new business model. Without box two, box three will never happen. In fact, working with organizations, what I have found of my three boxes, the box that is the most difficult is box two. And box two is about forgetting, and box three is about creating. Box two is about forgetting, and box three is about learning. If you can't forget, you can't learn. As simple as that. Again, think about how many books we have written on learning organizations. We haven't written a single book on forgetting organizations. And the way, what you need to forget is the dominant logic. That is why, if you're General Motors, you want to create a self-driving car. It will never happen inside your gasoline-powered, internal combustion-driven automobile business unit. It'll never happen because they have awful lot of box two problem. Box one has a lot of box two problem because they have to forget a lot of dominant logic. But you don't want box one to forget any of those dominant logic, because if you forgot those, you can't make money in box one. Box one is still a valid business. In fact, today for General Motors, 99% of their sales is coming from internal combustion driven gasoline powered automobiles. That is the foundation. Maybe sometimes in the future, there may be self-driving car, electric vehicles, ride sharing, etc. Certainly something like that will happen in the future. But today, 99% of your sales are in your core business, and the core business has a dominant logic. Mechanical engineers, dealership, all kinds of principles that govern the current automobile. Therefore, in order to forget the dominant logic, you have to create the dedicated team. So box 2, when you create a dedicated team, essentially you're responding to box 2. And that's why General Motors has got Cruise Automation, which is their self-driving car division in Silicon Valley, in which they have the majority shareholders. SoftBank has invested, Honda has invested, but Cruise Automation is a separate business. But Cruise Automation is also connected to the mothership. Unlike, say, Waymo, which is also software, self-driving car is not just a software, it's also a car. So they need to understand how to make a car. It's a hardware and software integration. And hardware, General Motors box 1 business knows how to do that. So you need a mothership connection. And the mothership connection is going to create an awful lot of conflicts, because the people in Cruise Automation are paid differently, they are younger, they have different skills. You're recruiting AI and other people. A person who joins a top artificial intelligence expert who you're trying to attract to your self-driving car division, Cruise, in Silicon Valley, he's not comparing, should I join General Motors or Ford? He's saying, should I join General Motors or Google? So you got to pay him differently. Right. And that compensation is different what you pay to people in your
traditional
units in Detroit. And those are all the conflicts you got to manage.
If this is tough in large companies, I think for medium-sized companies, they have completely different challenges, even in terms of funding for the executives. Would they be able to fund a separate unit with the autonomy and maybe even some of the support structures which they start developing on their own? Can you share examples of small to mid-sized organizations who have done this successfully?
I think it's a great point. I find the problem in 3-box solution is less about resources, more about mindset, more about courage, more about the organizational culture that you talked about. Sure, a mid-sized company has fewer resources as compared to a large company. But if resources were the only issue, big companies should be doing all kinds of box 3. And big companies are struggling, right, because it's always a mindset issue. Yeah. In fact, many CEOs tell me, I wish I could tell my employees I don't have a lot of resources. Because the moment you tell them you got a lot of resources, they substitute resources for imagination. Therefore, I say the real problem is not resources. It's about courage. It's about acting. Therefore, for small and medium-sized companies, what I say is you must partner with other players. You may not be able to invest in all the capabilities yourself. Therefore, you create a set of ecosystem partners, and you play a role in the ecosystem. Thereby, you can minimize your own resource commitment, but you have the idea to create something big in which you can participate. So therefore, I would say, if you're a medium-sized company, don't get discouraged. If you have the right leadership, you can actually succeed.
I think that's a great point in terms of partnerships. In fact, in AI, we're seeing a lot of partnerships, particularly in startups. Perhaps that's they do this partnership for the technology know-how. Maybe it's also helping them address some of these inherent challenges. The other critical aspect I've seen for AI transformations to succeed is collaboration across the organization. So AI needs orchestrated efforts from multiple people across different skills. What are some best practices that companies have adopted for fostering collaboration?
Let me answer your question by first stepping back and giving a view of why digital transformation is such a big deal. And then I'll answer your question as to how we create this collaboration across the enterprise to make digital transformations happen. By the way, there are only two ways by which companies build competitive advantage: scale and scope. And if you think about industrial era companies, this is at the turn of the 20th century, we had industrial revolution. And companies like Ford, General Motors, General Electric, Rolls-Royce, P&G, a whole lot of companies came into existence. Now, and that was a golden era where industrial companies really drove growth in this country. And they drove growth through two means: scale and scope. What do we mean by that? Scale is, for General Motors, grew their top line by scale. Scale is number of cars you produce and sell. If you produce and sell more cars, your top line sales revenue goes up. That is scale. Scale is a market share measure.
Mhm.
That is how General Motors grew. But scale-based growth is always linear and gradual. Why? Because if you want to increase your market share by producing and selling more cars, you have to build factories. You have to build dealership. You have to spend money on marketing. You can do all of that, but it takes time to build factories. It takes time to build dealership because these are physical assets. That is why growth through scale in the industrial era was always linear and gradual. The second way industrial companies grew was through scope. If you take a look at an industrial era company like Procter & Gamble, scale-based growth for them would be number of units of laundry detergent you produce and sell. Now, suppose you want to grow your top line more than the number of units of laundry detergent you produce and sell, they can enter adjacent industries.
Mhm.
So now P&G enters disposable diapers.
Okay.
Therefore, now their sales revenue is not just dependent on number of units they sell in laundry detergent, it also includes number of units they sell in disposable diapers. But scope-based growth is also linear and gradual because P&G can only enter adjacent industries. P&G can't enter automobiles. They can only leverage their core competence and enter adjacent industries. So their core competence, one of their core competencies is distribution know-how, because they send the laundry detergent to grocery stores. And by the way, when a van is going, taking laundry detergent to a grocery store, you can also throw a disposable diaper in the same truck. So this is scope-based growth. But that is also linear and gradual. What is happening in digital era is digital companies like Google and Amazon, etc., they also only grow through scale and scope, but they grow exponentially. Their growth is non-linear and exponential, whereas industry era companies, their growth was linear and gradual. Why? That is because for General Motors, scale-based growth is number of units of cars they produce and sell. Whereas for Uber, their scale is the number of cars in their network. That is why their growth is exponential. Marriott, which is an industrial era company, after operating for 100 plus years, today they have 1.5 million hotel rooms. Airbnb, which started 10 years ago, they have over 8 million hotel rooms, 8 million rooms. Because product-based scale is different from database scale. So scale for digital companies is exponential. Scope is also exponential because P&G can only enter adjacent industries, whereas digital companies can enter every industry because their core competence is data, it is software, it is analytics. So using that, you have an iPhone, you can open the iPhone, there is an app for photography, they compete with photography companies. An app for music, they compete with music companies. There's an app for Apple Pay, they compete with credit card companies. Is there any connection between automobiles and credit cards and photography and music? None. Because the core competency of digital companies is fundamentally different. Therefore, if you're an industrial company, when you formulate your strategy, before you even think of AI and data science, you have to first formulate a strategy about how you're going to grow your scale and scope at breakneck speed. That is what they don't do. Therefore, most of the efforts, digital transformation efforts, are only in name. It is nothing more than box one project. I was always fascinated when I used to drive by McDonald's. They used to have a sign which said 1 million burgers sold, 5 million burgers sold, 1 billion burgers sold. This is a typical industrial era way of keeping score. How many burgers you produce and sell. By the way, digital companies do not keep score that way. Digital companies want to know who is eating the burger. Because they know who is eating the burger, they can satisfy more of the customer problems. I have a Facebook page. Several years ago, I made a post on the Facebook page. My daughter is engaged. Somebody in Facebook using artificial intelligence is analyzing my Facebook page. Suddenly, bridal shower, bridal this, bridal that, ads are coming through my page because Facebook knows who is eating the burger. Many times when industry era companies tell me, hey, I'm a insurance company, I've now opened an internet channel instead of just using only my broker. I got a digital strategy. I say, no, you don't have a digital strategy. All that you have is another way your customer can access your product. You are still selling the burger to that guy. You really don't know who is eating your burger.
Yeah.
That is the fundamental difference.
Yeah.
So therefore, unless it is not about creating a software business for these physical companies, you got to change from selling products to solving customer problems. And to solve customer problems, you must know who is eating the burger. Most of the physical analog-based companies tell me, we are customer-centric. I say, you are not customer-centric. You are customer-centric only to sell them more burgers. Whereas Amazon is not customer-centric in that way. They don't want to sell you more books. They know everything about you. That is the fundamental mindset shift. Then AI and all come underneath it. Going back to your point, therefore, AI will fail if it is a fragmented effort in various parts of the company. If you are an insurance company, you have a division which sells life insurance, another division which sells auto insurance, a third division which sells property insurance, because these are fundamentally different products. So they require different competencies. You have 3 different business units. Do not let data scientists in these 3 business units do digital transformation. It will fail because they will all be pushing products. That's all they'll do. If you have a centralized digital transformation business unit, they will begin to understand who is eating the burger, because the life insurance, property insurance, and auto insurance is bought by the same guy. What you really need is to know who is eating the burger.
Yeah.
Then you can sell him, hey, if you're buying insurance products, maybe you need to protect yourself against fire. Maybe I will partner with a fire security company and come and install security systems in your. That doesn't mean you have to produce all the products. Solving customer problems doesn't mean you have to produce the products, but you must understand what the customer needs are. So that is the missing point. That is why I say you must centralize that box 3 unit. When you centralize the box 3 unit, you're not only able to understand customer problem, there's another important point, which is you can build core competencies. If every business unit is trying to recruit an AI expert, then you are not building a center of excellence. Whereas if Prudential or any of these life insurance companies have a central digital box 3 unit, then there is a center of excellence. Then you have more chance of attracting top talent. And the top talent can have a software business which begins to really understand customer problems. So that's the main problem.
In terms of centralizing and integration of the box 3, I understand this is once the box 3 gets to a certain size. Earlier, you spoke about how this has to be nurtured. The way from this response, the way I'm reading this is you get it to a certain stage, and once it has achieved scale, then you centralize it and eventually switch over from the traditional process to the box 3 one, which has now been developed. Is that right?
What I would say is, even before it becomes big, if you're a CEO of an insurance company, try to seed a separate experiment on digital. That experimental unit should be reporting directly to you. Don't put that experimental unit under your life insurance division and this division and that division. If you're General Motors, have an experimental unit around self-driving vehicles. Don't put it underneath your truck division and car division and this division and that division. That unit may be very small to begin with. And then you keep resources, it'll become big. Therefore, when I say centralize, what I really mean is create a distinct unit which can ultimately become a center of excellence. And from the day one, you must create some space between that and your core business.
Okay. Just one follow-on question there. So when do you see a distinction between companies that are, say, birthing a completely new offering, for example, General Motors, and you talked about the self-driving car unit.
Yeah.
That kind of an innovation and shift is a little different from, let us say, a warehouse company which maintains warehouses and provides the services. So there's no completely new offering that they're going to be providing, but there's a significant improvement they can do in terms of understanding the customers, like you mentioned, customer experience and all of those aspects. But the business fundamentally may not change. But there's a transformation you can do within the existing business. Do you see the way the 3-box solutions apply to these two classes of companies different?
I would say what you are describing is using digital tools to make your core business more profitable. That you can keep within your core. You are not changing the strategy.
Okay.
You see, again, coming back to educational industry, technology is not new to me. Once upon a time, I used to use something called a chalkboard.
Okay.
Then I had a whiteboard. Then I had a slide projector. Then I had a PowerPoint. Now, these are all technologies that improve my delivery. That you can keep within your box one. That does not change my business model.
That's true.
Yeah. But that just makes my business model more efficient. What I'm talking about is using digital and physical to create a new strategy. That requires new units.
Yeah, understood. I think the distinction is clear. Yeah, thank you. So we'll be coming to the last part of the interview. A few questions more to learn about how you ideate, and I'm more curious about other aspects. So one parallel I saw is based on the 3-box solution and what you've explained about the how companies can use it. Do you apply 3-box solution to your personal life?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, you see, the 3-box solution really comes from the Hindu spirituality, as you well know. In Hindu spirituality, we have 3 gods. There is Lord Vishnu. He's the god of preservation. That is box 1, manage the present. Then there is Lord Shiva. He's the god of destruction. That is box 2, destroy the past. And there is Lord Brahma, God of creation, that is box 3, create the future. In Hindu spirituality, what it says is, Hindu spirituality tries to explain how the human being sustains itself for centuries. And the human race sustains itself for centuries when the three gods do their job in a balanced way. None of these three gods are more important than the other two. If they do their job in a balanced way, humanity will sustain. In fact, Hinduism draws life as a circle. The moment you draw life as a circle, there is no beginning, there is no end. Everything that is born will be preserved. That is the job of Lord Vishnu. Box 1, manage the present. Everything that is preserved will be ultimately destroyed. That is the job of Lord Shiva. Box 2, destroy the past. Everything that is destroyed will get regenerated. That is the job of Lord Brahma. That is box 3, create the future. And everything that's created will be preserved. That is the job of Lord Vishnu. And the circle keeps on going. If it keeps on going, we as a humanity will sustain. I have simply taken something written in Hindu scriptures 5,000 years ago about this notion of preservation, destruction, creation as a continuous rhythmic process by which humanity survives, and simply apply it to companies. If your company has to survive forever, you must master preservation, destruction, creation as a continuous cycle. This is never mission accomplished because change is always going to happen. Therefore, once you create box 3, that'll become box 1. Then you can create the next box 3. So this is a process, applies to organizations, applies to business units, applies to functions like human resources. Therefore, it applies to individuals. And I have really, really taken that to heart. And I practice that. And very much the principles that underlie three-box solution are essentially principles that you can use to run your own personal life. And therefore, I tell leaders, future is not about what you have to do in the future. Future is about what you do today to create the future. Just like organizations, that's also true for individuals. Therefore, as an individual, every day you got to wake up in the morning and ask yourself, did I spend enough time in box 1 today? Did I spend enough time in box 2 today? Did I spend enough time in box 3 today? Very important. And I always say, successful leaders, the more successful you are, the more difficult it is for you to practice three-box solution. Because the more successful you are, you mistake that success for validation of the past. Therefore, your way of creating the future is to do more of the past. And also, the reason why we as individuals do not focus or invest in box 3 is, if you don't invest in box 3, it doesn't hurt you today. It only hurts you in the future. That's why you won't invest. Take, for instance, a simple box 3 investment for an individual, which is to do exercise every day. If you did exercise every day, you're assured of future health. Now, why can't you practice this simple, commonsensical thing? The reason being, today you may say, you know what, I got to interview VG, I got a lot of emails to check. I'm kind of very busy today. I got a good excuse not to do exercise today. If you don't do exercise today, your health doesn't decline today. It only declines in the year 2025. That's why you do postpone that investment. By the way, if you don't do exercise today, your health actually declines today. The decline is so small. The decline is so insignificant, you don't notice. Future comes in daily doses. Future never arrives all of a sudden in the future. You don't become old one day. You are becoming old every day. Let's accept that. Let's understand that. Let's have the discipline, therefore, to invest in the present and the future every day. Easy to say, hard to do. But I practice that very religiously, for sure.
Good to hear. And this is a brilliant analogy with the Hindu spirituality. You have been continuously generating breakthrough ideas, and you've been working with organizations and teaching. So I'm very curious to know what are some processes, rituals, or habits that have helped you generate ideas continuously.
In fact, it really goes back to something I learned from my grandfather. My grandfather is if you get the 3-box solution book, I've dedicated to my grandfather. He is just about everything for me, and he taught me about the power of 3-box solution and how to get these breakthrough ideas on a consistent basis. And this is how it kind of happened. I used to stand first in class in school, and that wasn't that difficult because there were only 10 kids in my class. I know the other 9, I know how to beat them. Then I came to the university. My university had 25,000 students, and I didn't know any of them. And I stood first in the university, won the gold medal. I took the gold medal and my transcript to my grandfather. And my grandfather kind of looked at it and said, you only got 90 out of 100 in history. There is 10 possible marks you could have gotten. You only got 95 out of 100 in English. There is another possibility gap we got to close. He wasn't trying to intimidate me. He wasn't trying to embarrass me. He wasn't trying to humiliate me. He was telling me, VG, never be satisfied in being a gold medalist amongst 25,000 students. That should never be your bar. Your bar should be your true potential. And your true potential is 100 out of 100. And if you achieve that, obviously you're going to win 20 gold medal amongst 25,000 students. That goes without saying. Therefore, I always say strategy is about achieving true potential. As individuals, we can ask ourselves the question, am I achieving true potential? You will never achieve your true potential if you only focus on performance gap in box 1. There is also possibility gap in box 2, box 3. It is performance gap plus possibility gap is how you become great and achieve your true potential in 2030. If you're General Motors, you want to achieve your true potential in 2030. You got to excel in your gasoline-powered car, but you have to invest in ride-sharing and self-driving cars and electric vehicles. And what my grandfather taught me was make competition irrelevant. If you're General Motors, don't look at Ford. That leads to mediocrity. The only competition that matters is self-competition. Self-competition is about achieving true potential. By the way, as parents, you can either put pressure on your kids to perform or dare them to dream. My grandfather wasn't putting pressure on me to perform. He was daring me to dream. He was saying, there is the art of the possible. Why don't you look at that? I used to be excited. I used to be inspired. I used to be longing when he says, hey, look at this. You're weak in European history. That's why you lost 10 marks. Let's shore up your European history. I used to love it. Therefore, I think they ultimately, you want to constantly come up with ideas for growth as an organization or as an individual. You have to dream big. You have to be a tempered dreamer, but you have to dream big. Therefore, ultimately, that is the secret sauce. If you can dream big, then you will search for all these ideas. And those ideas are many times inside your ears. It just requires a process to bring it out. There is a great swimmer, I don't know whether you're into Olympics or not, a great swimmer called Katie Ledecky. If you're following swimming, she is one of the most sensational swimmers to come along. She has won the most medals in Olympics. She is the equivalent of Michael Phelps on the female side.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike Michael Phelps, she is a very nice person.
Okay.
And Katie Ledecky doesn't do short races. She's a distance swimmer. She does 800-meter freestyle, 1,500-meter freestyle, etc. And at the tender age of 15, she won gold in 800-meter freestyle in London Olympics. By the way, if you're 15 years old, your body is not built to even swim 800 meters, much less win a gold medal. In 2016, Rio Olympics, now she's 19 years old. She won 5 medals, 4 gold and 1 silver. In 2023, 2021, Summer Olympics in Tokyo, she won 4 medals.
Wow.
the most sensational swimmer. Somebody asked her, what is your secret sauce? How are you able to continuously, and she sets world records after world records after world records. The 23 top times in 800-meter freestyle belongs to her. The 24th belongs to another swimmer. She has got the 23 top times. So somebody asked her, what is your secret sauce? She said something in that interview which resonated with me, because that's what my grandfather was telling me. She said, I never race against other swimmers.
Wow. Okay.
I only race against time.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, she came into Rio Olympics in 2016 and asked her coach, what is humanly possible in 800-meter freestyle? And the coach said, it is not humanly possible to complete 800-meter freestyle in anything less than 8 minutes and 5 seconds. She said, I'm going to beat that. I believe she came 8 minutes and 4 seconds. Silver medalist did 8 minutes and 52 seconds. Silver medalist did 8 minutes 52 seconds. Ledecky does 8 minutes and 4 seconds. And that 48-second difference was more than 2 pool length difference in 800-meter freestyle. This is the point.
Yeah.
If she did 8 minutes and 51 seconds, she would have won gold. But she wouldn't have achieved her true potential. Achieving true potential is about thinking about the art of the possible. And therefore, that is what keeps me motivated always. I'm never satisfied with what the gold medal that I've got. I say, what is possible? And that is an exciting journey. Therefore, then you find, I find new topics to research and new companies to work with. 20 years ago, I wouldn't know what that is. But if you keep the bar high enough, you will search for them and you will make them happen. Therefore, as an organization also, if you want to achieve your true potential, box 3 ideas will come if you dream big.
Yeah, that's an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing that. And achieving true potential, the way you mentioned earlier, if I look at those 3 boxes, it's a never-ending cycle. So I think that will keep you going for a very long time.
That is why it's never a journey that is finished, because achieving true potential today doesn't mean you'll achieve true potential 10 years from today, because the world keeps changing. You got to circle through again. And it is an interesting journey. It is an exciting journey. It is a rewarding journey. And it is a journey where you never feel like a failure, because if you shoot for, say, in the case of Ledecky, 8 minutes and 5 seconds is what I want to beat in 800-meter freestyle. Suppose you end up doing 8 minutes and 15 seconds. That is not a failure, because you are trying to push what is possible. In fact, I say when you set incremental goals, there is more stress than when you dream big. Because if you dream big and don't achieve 8 minutes and 5 seconds, you only achieve 8 minutes and 15 seconds. Anyway, you're thinking of the impossible, so you don't feel bad. But if you set incremental goals, as a salesman, if you say, I want to grow my sales by 1,000% and only end up growing the sales by 200%, you don't feel bad. But if you say, I want to grow the sales by 1% and don't achieve it, you feel like a failure, therefore more stress. So it actually liberates you.
Yeah, the small ones are always more manageable and more inspiring. Yeah, you also feel good about it once you achieve it. Yeah. On that note, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'll take this learning to heart and I'll remember that. So it's been a pleasure talking to you, Professor Vijay. Thank you for being on this show.
It's all my pleasure, and look forward to seeing your article.